here today in front of Canters Deli, which is the place where Mark Cantor, a man who grew up with Slash and Guns N' Roses, would come and hang out. And he's also written a book called Reckless Road. So come along with me today and we're going to go see Canters, talk with Mark, learn about his book and the history of Guns N' Roses right here in Canters Deli on Fairfax in Los Angeles. I am here with Mark Cantor, and he is the author of the book Reckless Road about Guns N' Roses and the start of Guns N' Roses. And so, Mark, tell us about the book and a little bit about yourself.
Well, the book is really, it starts with Slash, documenting Slash. I grew up with him. We were best friends in grammar school, and you know, everything he did was pretty cool, riding bikes, drawing, and when he started playing guitar, that's when it really, you know, started to resonate what he's going to be doing for a living. So I documented it. I helped him get to the next level, and you know, I did what I could. And at some point, you know, he met the rest of the guys. Sort of in 1984, he met Axl, Izzy, and they kind of threw it together a band. Axl was in a band, Hollywood Rose, and with Izzy, and Slash joined, but just as Slash joined, Izzy sort of quit. And Steven was also there, and this guy Steve Darrell, who was on bass, and you know, they threw together a few originals, but it just didn't stick. And about after 3 months, that band fell apart, and Axl continued to go into, he actually moved on to LA Guns, and Slash continued on, looking for another band to join. And about 6-7 months later, Guns N' Roses actually started without Slash. It was with Tracy. It was a side project that Axl and Tracy Guns put together, a combination of LA Guns and Hollywood Rose, and they just named it Guns N' Roses. And that way, nobody would really have the power. It would just be like an equal project. That kind of went on for a little while. Their bass player quit, and they hired Duff, who was literally their neighbor. And Duff, we already knew Duff because Duff was jamming with Slash, 4 or 5 months before that, while Slash was looking for, a bass player. And so it's kind of a small circle of people. They booked a couple more gigs, and then what happened was Duff, who was from Seattle, booked a gig to a little tour in Seattle, and up north, Portland, Seattle. And Tracy Guns didn't really want to go up there, and Rob Gardner, the drummer, didn't want to go up there. And they were also having probably some issues on putting songs together, whatever. They had some arguments. And so they had this gig booked at the Troubadour on June 6th of 1985. And it's like in the end of May. Slash is in this band Black Sheep, and they got a gig booked and no guitar player, no drummer. So they go to that Black Sheep gig and they say, hey, Slash, Tracy's out, Rob Gardner's out, you and Steven in, we got a gig, and then we're going to Seattle. So Slash had just joined Black Sheep, but he dropped out of Black Sheep to go join back with them. They played that gig at the Troubadour, and then like 2 days later they headed out, or a day later they headed out up north, and that's where it became Hell Tour, where their car broke down and the transmission kind of blew, and they were kind of stranded and hitchhiking, and so they called it Hell Tour, and it kind of, they knew they were fit.
Actually, I do remember reading a little bit about this, and that was kind of when they became tighter together, and a lot of their album Appetite for Destruction, kind of like the ground was starting. They were starting to lay that together.
Right after that, they basically put together Welcome to the Jungle was their first song they put together, and then it was Rocket Queen, then it was basically Paradise City and Night Train and My Michelle. Those songs just kept coming out. There were no songs in between that were throwaways. Everything they did stuck. And yes, that was the grounds of they knew they were fit musicians, but that tour is what kind of solidified them, because it kind of suffered together, and it was the glue that held them together, and they were able to keep it together long enough to get signed and put out Appetite for Destruction. And pretty much that's what it was. It was just a mix of those 5 guys. What they were going through at the time is what you're going to hear on Appetite for Destruction.
I kind of remember when Appetite came out. I was in college. I was a little bit younger back then, but some friends of mine, all they would do, they'd play that over and over and over again. And after a while, I kind of got a little bit sick of it because it was like every time I went to this guy, it was like I was all he played. But it did basically burn a hard copy of it in the back of my brain. So I was very and I'm happy that they were able to come back, and I finally got to see them because there was a long time that they didn't tour together. But now tell me about so you grew up with Slash,
Yeah.
and you how did you meet him?
Well, okay. The actual story is I had a little motorbike, like they call it a mini bike. It had a lawnmower engine in it, and I was at the Kentucky Fried Chicken on 3rd and Fuller, and he was walking by. It turned out he lived only a block south from me, and I knew him from school, but we never talked. I just kind of recognized him. But he saw that motorbike, and he decided maybe I could steal it, maybe I could ride it, who knows, you know. So he was kind of looking at it, eyeing it out, and then he recognized me. So rather than trying to steal it or make trouble, he figured, well, he knows me, sort of. So we just kind of like, hey, can I ride it? That kind of a thing. And then that was the start of our friendship.
Cool. You're still friends with him.
Yes.
Now tell me about the Kibitz Room and Guns N' Roses.
They hung out here. They actually took their first group shot at this booth that we're sitting in right after Hell Tour because they knew they wanted to come back and book some gigs and they needed some publicity photos. So they actually came here and sat at this table, took those publicity shots. They took some shots in the alley. And, you know, they ate here. I brought them food a lot. So it's not really, they didn't really play here because at that time we weren't having music in the Kibitz Room. If we did, I'm sure they would have played here many times. But later on in 1992, when the Kibitz Room was going, because it started really in 1989, when Slash was off tour, he'd come and jam a couple of times with what was going on here on Tuesday nights.
That'd always be fun. Just
Well, what's interesting about that is he didn't come with equipment. He just showed up to hang out and maybe jam a song. So he gets on stage and there's this green Strat that was bought like a week ago from Guitar Center for $200 and, you know, plugged into a crappy amp. And, you know, he just put it on and, you know, moved the knobs around a little bit and then you hear Slash. So it's not the guitar, it's not the amp. It's the guitar player. You know, you could hear exactly that was Slash. We both sort of, you know, he took a couple guitar lessons and then once he, you know, can put a few chords together, he quit and just, you know, self-taught himself. But coincidentally, I ended up going to the same, it was Fairfax Music School, right just south of Santa Monica. And Robert Wolin was the guitar teacher there, and actually the Red Hot Chili Peppers learned from him and a bunch of different people. So that amp, there was a pig nose, one of those 12-inch pig nose. And just as I was learning how to play guitar, that amp was for sale, so I bought it for $100. And it turned out that everyone had played through that amp before me. So, but no, Slash and I used to practice through that amp at home, and you know, I used to play some rhythms, and he'd play, you know, lead, and so there's a lot of history with that amp. That amp was a Kibitz Room amp for many years, but one day I realized that at some point it's going to disappear, so I took it home.
This is a tool where Slash learned to play guitar off of this, so that would have been a very, it is a very special amp. So now, actually, some people say because Slash self-taught himself to play guitar.
Much. You know, I think he went there and he wanted to play the bass, and the guitar teacher said, well, the bass has 4 strings, the guitar has 6, and he realized he'd rather have the 6 strings than the 4 strings. And, you know, they gave him the basics, taught him a few chords, and, you know, how to put things together. I think he was just there for a couple of months, maybe once a week for a couple of months, and then he just kind of, you know, practiced on his own, and his own talent just poured right through it.
Yeah, and some people feel that sometimes the self-discovery helps improve the art and takes it even further, while some people who are basically learning the exact chords and learning the mathematics and study and following, it kind of sometimes takes the soul out of the music, and so that's good.
Yeah, I mean, everything that he did was pretty much from the heart, and he had good influences. He liked good music from the 70s and from the late 60s, and in 1983, 1984, 1985, when they were fooling around and trying to put bands together, there was nothing out there anymore. All the music had really died. Good rock and roll music had died, and they just came around and did their own version of what they believed, should be going out there, and it turned out to be, Appetite for Destruction was the record they came up with. But that was just them writing songs for themselves and about what was going on in their life at the time. They had no one to impress. Sure, they ended up getting signed, but that, their goal was to put music together and get out and play it in front of the people. And yeah, it was good enough. It stuck, and everyone loved it. They had all the elements that you could possibly want in a good band. They had the image, they had the sound, they had the look. Well, looks isn't part of image, but songwriting ability, just everything, the right attitude. They just, the right talent and the right mix of chemistry to make it work. And you get bands today that are good, but it's usually one or possibly two people driving that band. And this band, all five of them, were inputting how that record came out.
And now Canters, which is the deli that we are at, is it's right here on Fairfax, just south of Melrose, and it's an iconic place for people in music and people who work with music, DJs, and you pretty much have had probably all kinds of people come through here.
Well, okay, so Canters, yes. Way before any of those guys were born, Canters was catering to basically the entertainment world, simply because we were open 24 hours a day, and we were right in the heart of Los Angeles. So, Neil Young, when he moved here from Canada in 1966, he drove a hearse to carry his equipment in. And we didn't know this until a few years ago when I read this in Rolling Stone magazine, but he sort of worked for us. He taxied patrons from Canters Deli to the Sunset Strip back and forth for $1 a ride. So there was a lot. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Doors, The Turtles, Frank Zappa, everybody was here on a daily basis pretty much. Or if any band came into town and played at the Whiskey, afterwards they'd mingle around here and hang out. So you had a lot. I mean, members of the Beatles, you had Elvis, you had just, I wouldn't, it's A to Z basically. If especially in the 60s, because whether they liked us or not, we were the only place open. So there's a lot of rock and roll history, and still is today. I mean, Bono comes in here, I couldn't even start to name it. Everyone comes in, nobody bothers them. They sit down, they don't ask for special treatment. They order from their waitress, they pay their check, and maybe somebody will recognize them and grab a picture with them. So it's just pretty much living room atmosphere, because I'm friends with them and they had no money, so of course we're hungry, we're going to eat here. So, and the food's good, so that's, Guns N' Roses spent many, not necessarily as a group, just a couple, we go out at night, and at the end of the night we'd end up here, whoever was in our car basically. Mainly with Slash, because Slash was the one that I started my journey with. So, but Steven, Axel, anyone else that was in the car, went to the movies that we went to, or whatever we were doing that night, hanging out with their girlfriends, we'd always end up here, at least on a Friday or Saturday night. Now they're too big and too busy.
They have a green room for all that, I guess.
Actually, when the Rolling Stones played Dodger Stadium, they had us cater them, so just to their personal crew and guests. So they were smart enough to know that the food at Dodger Stadium's not that good.
No Dodger dogs, huh?
Actually, I did. Besides the corned beef and pastrami, things that I brought up there, actually requested hot dogs. But I brought, Canner hot dogs out there, which is maybe 3,000 or 4,000 times better than a Dodger dog.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
So the first time, all the years I've been here and grew up here, I never had a black and white until about probably 10 or 12 years ago, when I do all the maintenance here, physical, like refrigeration, plumbing, electrical, that kind of stuff. And one day I was literally inside the bakery oven, which is a huge oven. It's about, the shelves are about 10 or 12 feet long, and there's 6 of them throughout the oven.
And so you're inside this big oven.
Inside the oven, and it takes about 6 or 7 hours to cool down, but it was probably about 3 or 4 hours into the cooling, But we have this big, giant monster fan. And if you get in the oven and you think I'm crazy, but if you put a jacket on, you would think, why would you have a jacket in the oven? And the answer is so you don't get burned. So you have this air blowing on you, and you have a jacket on. You have cardboard on the shelves, so you don't bake in there. So I'm in there doing what I need to do, and I haven't eaten all day, and it smells really good in there because there's a bunch of merchandise that got stuck in the oven when it broke on other shelves, not the shelf I'm working on. But I have access to it because I could reach it. But anyways, I'm smelling something, and I'm looking at it, and it turned out to be the black and white cookie. But of course, the black and white cookie gets frosted, after it's baked, and I didn't recognize it because I had never really seen one until it's frosted, and then you know what it is. So I'm like, I looked at it, I couldn't understand what it was, and I was eating it, and I ate like 3 of them. It was like the best thing I ever had in my life. Then I asked the bakers after I was done with the job, what have I been eating? They said, oh, that's going to be the black and white cookie. So now I pretty much eat one every day.
So come to Canters and get a black and white cookie.
Or a chocolate shake.
Or a chocolate shake, yeah.
Or Reuben.
Or Reuben.
Our pickles, our matzo ball soup, barley bean soup, potato pancakes, those are our signature items. And
That mac and cheese panini you made in that time.
oh yeah, that's pretty good. A Mac Attack. So yeah.
So you guys watching there, are you hungry yet?
Well, yeah, I mean, the food is pretty good. Although I have to eat her 7 days a week, so I got to get creative sometimes and, come up with new things to keep me, interested.
Now let's talk about your book.
Well, yeah. So it basically covers the first 50 gigs of Guns N' Roses. My idea was to basically make it a scrapbook where you're going to get pictures from the gig, you're going to get from each gig they played, you're going to get the flyer, the ticket stub, any clipping that there was, press about the band or the band ad that we put in Band Magazine, or just any, little bits and tidbits of information, what was going on with the band around that gig, or if they debuted a new song that gig. I also, because I recorded all those shows, I was able to transcribe them and then put all this stuff, or some of the stuff that they said in between the songs, which kind of makes you feel like you're there. You get access to say, this is a new one, it's not much, but it's the best I could do. This song is for Barbie. This song is called Rocket Queen. And then they go into Rocket Queen. So it's kind of like you get goosebumps because they played it that night exactly the way it sounds on the record, right down to the guitar solo. And that's the first time they performed it, and you get to hear what the guys were saying before they, or what the chit chat between the songs while they're tuning and communicating with the audience. It just gives it more of a personal touch. And so that was, I put it together in I started in 1993, and it took me about 15 months to put together the version 1 of it, and it didn't get published at that time because the band was falling apart, so it kind of sat for 12 more years, and then by accident I ran into these people that found out that I had it, and they were doing some interesting things with the internet and putting audio to it and having, really just technology was there. So they really got excited about it. They were independent. They had never published a book before, but they got some funding, and they came back like 3 months later, and they said, yeah, we'll do it. So I was happy to, finally get it out after I did all that work, and I wanted the fans to have it. And so it's my gift, because I grew up a fan of Aerosmith, and I know what it'd be like if somebody had documented them before they got famous and then put all this stuff together and put it out. I'd go crazy for it. So I'm like a fly on the wall for the people that found out about the band one way or another, and now they can go back and see how it all kind of, it's like an encyclopedia of the early days.
And where can we find the book?
Well, you could find the book on Amazon. I sell the book here at Canters. You go on eBay. I have an eBay store under Mark Canter, one word, MarcCanter. Or you could just go on eBay and put in the words Reckless Road, and it'll probably come up, or whatever. So, I mean, some bookstores have it, but it's hard to tell which ones do and which ones don't. So, because like I said, it was an independent publisher, so it wasn't like it got the proper shelf space that it should have gotten.
Why Reckless Road?
Well, actually, my co-author, Jason Porath, came up with that name. I actually didn't like it at first. I thought, but I did like it for a chapter. The chapter right after they got signed, because all kinds of bad things were going on, and there was a 2 or 3, 4 months that you weren't sure if they were going to live or die, or if they're going to get dropped or go to jail or whatever. So just a lot of craziness going on. So that was definitely a reckless road, but it grew on me real quick, and I couldn't see any other name for it now. So I think I entitled it at first Guns N' Roses, The Club Dazed, like Dazed and Confused.
Okay.
But then I thought some people might not be able to find it because they might be looking for Club Days with, Days. So
Sure.
then I was, back and forth with that one, and then it just became Reckless Road. Yeah, there's fine art photos that, bunch of different people say, hey, can you get me a photo on page, 28 or whatever, they give me the page number. And after a while, and then, you number it, a limited edition, you sign it. So after a while, because I was getting those requests, I was already used to doing it. It was costing me a ton of money, and I was pretty much doing them a favor. And then I realized that if I buy it in bulk, I can keep the price down and then make it reasonable for the fans. And so I started buying frame supplies, like 50 frames at a time, and the acrylic, the non-glare UV protective acrylic. If you try to just buy one piece of that, it could be $70, $80 just for the glass. But if you buy sheets of them and have them cut, and you get like 50 glasses, it brings the price way down to closer to like $20. So, I set myself up a little framing thing, and it's kind of like a hobby. And it's cool because one time it was actually Christmas Day, and I was delivering some food because we were backed up on deliveries. And I ring this guy's doorbell, he answers the door, and my picture's hanging on his wall. So that was really cool to see that. Because I make them so that they'll last forever. They're nothing, unless your house burns down, this is going to live longer than you. So I know that one day when I'm gone, I'll have these little pieces of artwork hanging up and that I could be proud of. I could look down and say, that was cool. That was a good time in my life when, it's just, I had fun doing that. One day I'll break even. But I do it for the love. I do. It's in my heart. And, actually, who knows? Maybe one day my kids will make something from it.
Did you see the new shows or the new tour?
Yeah, I've checked that out, and I'm really the band sounds great, and actually I'm really happy that Axl's helping out with AC/DC. If I could go back in time and go back 32 years ago when we were hanging out and going to see Terminator or whatever, and saying, hey, one day you're going to be singing in stadiums as the singer of AC/DC, and then on top of that, your band's going to be even bigger than them. He would think I was crazy. But he pulled that off really well because his voice range is a perfect mix between Bon Scott and Brian Johnson. And at first I was a little worried that he was going to hurt himself because that's just, a couple hours of singing at that high pitch and hitting both of them right on the mark. Even though I know he can do it, I was also worried because Axl's the type of guy that he'll give you all or nothing. And he's going to go for it. And I was just hoping he didn't damage himself, but apparently he's doing fine, and he knows how to sing without, those notes without hurting himself. So I'm really proud of that.
Well, I sure can't do the Welcome to the Jungle. It'd be very hard on my voice.
You know where you are!
Exactly. That's like I said. And then now you've seen them both at the beginning and now. Do you have a preference which you prefer?
It's the evolution. It's all good. I'm just really happy that they're working together again. And this is something, when my book came out, I found myself doing interviews, going on chat boards, really to defend them. Because when I got there to check out what people were saying about the book, I found that there was this massive Slash versus Axl. It's Axl's fault, Slash's fault, blah, 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 back and forth. And I got in there and I said, no, it's actually nobody's fault. There was a lot of different miscommunication issues. They needed a break. And in the end, it was no one's fault. And I kind of got in there and just kind of smoothed things out a little bit, mainly defending Axl, but also defending Slash when needed. And but at the same time, I was basically talking to them. by me saying these things and saying them in interviews, I was hoping that they would hear these interviews and maybe plant a seed in their head that things aren't as bad as, as doomed as they think they are, and that it's just a matter of a couple. I was even saying the marriage, what do you call it, couples therapy or marriage counseling. Someone that's a professional like that can get in there and solve those issues because the issues weren't that bad. It's not like I killed you and you killed my aunt and we're never going to talk together. It's, it was just things that
Sure.
could be worked out. So for 9 years I sat there and did that, and now it's like, it's a breath of fresh air. I don't have to do that anymore. I hardly even do interviews anymore, to be honest with you, because there's, unless someone wants to hear about the history, then of course I'm always happy to do it. But for years I was just blogging about hoping that, that somehow they could work together at some point. So it's like a huge burden off my shoulders. It's once that happened, I just like, I could breathe again,
Now, the 80s were really well known for the hard rock and the heavy metal, and then it kind of like the grunge movement came in, and it kind of like cooled down. But now it's coming back strong. Any thoughts on that?
Well, okay, so music's okay. If you're into music and you put the hours in and put your bands together and go out and do those garage bands and do some gigs or whatever you're going to do, in today's world, it's very easy to get your music out there on the YouTube or on the internet or anywhere else you want to. You could even go on iTunes, pretty simple, not hard to do. So you could get your music available, but as far as record companies backing you, that is far and in between. It's just I'll tell you what it is. Record companies used to give away the shirts and the merchandise and hope that you'd buy the music. Now they give away the music in hopes that you buy the T-shirt. So that's where they're making their money, is on their merchandise and if they could tour and sell out venues. But the record companies are gone, so it's pretty much you have to put together your own music and push and get it out there, and maybe somebody will put you in a Sony PlayStation game, or if they hear you, or in a movie, a soundtrack in a movie, and you get your foot in the door, and it's just so you don't see bands showing up and just making it, and you certainly don't see a band with attitude where you'd want to put their poster on your wall. I remember when I was a kid, we'd go to Westwood and take the bus there, and we'd come back with some posters, from really cool rock and roll posters, whether it was a Zeppelin poster, Black Sabbath poster, an Aerosmith poster, something, even a Kiss poster, but just something. Now, you get a band, say like Muse, that they make great music, but I'm not so sure I'd put their poster on my wall because there's no attitude there. There's no, can you even name the guys, it's only 3 guys in the band, but what I'm saying is,
Matthew Bellamy.
You just don't have the desire. They're not going to influence you to go out and play rock and roll. That's kind of gone, really. I mean, Kurt Cobain they say he killed the rock star, but he still had an image. But after that, it just disappeared. The image is gone.
Well, a lot of bands also sign what is known as the 360 deals with the record companies, where the record company, pays for the recording and does all that, but then the record company then gets a percentage of all the ticket sales, all the T-shirt sales. Basically, it's like you sold your soul to rock and roll, kind of.
Yeah. My son is actually in a band called Kid Bloom, and they're going through the same thing. They're good fitted musicians. They're putting together all originals, and they're out there, and they got their movie, they got their song and songs and movies. They were in the new Independence Day movie, actually. They're out there, they do small little tours, but they keep having record companies coming to them, and it's not about just recording a record, it's about owning them, It's about owning them. So they keep passing on it, and just because, they're doing what they're doing. And if something happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. At least, they died with their boots on. They tried.
Sure. And so anything else you want to throw out there?
The music on the Sunset Strip is pay to play. You pay $720 or something like that, and then they give you like 60 tickets, and you have to sell those tickets at whatever, $15 a piece or whatever, just to break even. Or maybe if you sell them all, you might make $200. But other than that, most bands they can't even sell half of them, and they end up paying to play. And they give you a 30-minute set, and they want you there at 5 o'clock to do a sound check, but you don't go on until 10, and you got to stay there with your equipment. And basically, it's like slave labor. The Kibitz Room in 1989, I brought it back. It had music back in the 60s, but not that much. I brought it back in 1989 exactly for the opposite of what was going on. So bands could come here, and they do not pay to play. In fact, we feed them. And, and if they bring in enough people, we actually give them some money on top of that. But although it's free to get in, so it only works if those people are spending money. But it's more of a living room atmosphere. There's no pressure. There's no, oh, you're only on for a half an hour. Usually if a band is booked, they're booked for a half a night. And they got as much time. They can even do 2 sets if they want. They can sit down, take a break. There's no lighting man. There's no sound man. You set your PA. There's some lights up there, though, but there's no one controlling them. And you play. And you get, over the years, different, big musicians would come in, like Melissa Etheridge or Jackson Brown, something like that. And, they'd get up and jam with the band. They didn't know those people, but they saw that they're doing fun things. They're playing old covers, and they'll jam with them. People will get up and jam with the band because the band is not there on a serious matter. They're there as if they're in their living room and just playing Elton John songs or playing whatever, I've even seen songs fall apart because they went for a song that wasn't rehearsed, and it just kind of, they took it as far as they can get it, and then, some of the musicians don't know all the parts or all the changes, and, they know enough to start it, and then at some point the song will just fall apart and they all kind of laugh, and so that's what we do here. But then again, we're not making our living from the Kibitz Room, we're making our living from the restaurant. So we're able to give that back to the musicians to have a place to come and get their music out. And like Sunday night we have songwriters night, and so we give like little 20-minute sets to singer and songwriters. Usually 1 or 2 people get up there. It's acoustic. It's not a big thing, but it's cool because they write a song, they get to come here and play it with not even worried about who's going to book them, how much do they have to pay, how much does it cost to get in. It's free. So it's just, I'm really happy we're the only ones that really have that atmosphere where people could play without any pressure. I'm here all the time, and people come from Canada, they come from Finland, they come from Brazil, they come from all over the world. And this is like a part of their tourist attraction, just simply because they took their first picture here and they've heard about the book, and it's hard to get in certain countries, so they come here specifically to buy it. What I do is I sign all the books that are at the front register, and if I'm not here, they can still get a signed cover, a signed copy. But if I'm here, I always personalize it if they want me to, or I'll take a picture with them or whatever. But I'm always happy. I've put fans in my car and actually taken them on a little Reckless Road tour of where different locations, landmarks, and I'm not saying I do it all the time, but it's happened a couple of times where I find myself with nothing going on, and I could see the look in their eye, the hunger in their eye that they're here just for a day or two and they want to get as much covered as possible. So if I throw them in my car, we're going to get a lot done a lot quicker because I know exactly where, I'm a good tour guide.
Sounds better than the TMZ tour. I don't know.
There was actually somebody that wanted to put together a tour, like a bus tour of those sites, and have it GPS, so when the bus passes certain things, the recording comes on with me talking about, telling you, okay, so we're at the, like when you're half a block next to the Troubadour, the GPS tells you you're there, and the recording comes on. The pre-recording of me saying this is the first time they played this song, that song, they sold out a gig on November 22nd. The first sold-out gig was here, They got signed because Tom Zutaut saw them here on February 20th. So I have so much information in my brain that any one of these locations you pass by, I can tell you, 1,000 words about a little history about each. I can tell you where they bought their night train. So, different things like that. So I can even tell you where they bought their drugs, but which I didn't approve of. But there was actually talk of that, and it just kind of fell apart. That was about 7-8 years ago. But like I said, sometimes I do it on my own anyways. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you guys in my car and drive you around the city and tell you some cool stories and point out some landmarks.
So come along while we go around LA down the Sunset Strip and see Reckless Road and where Guns N' Roses got their start, right here on Heavy Metal Greg.
We are at Fairfax and Beverly Boulevard. We're going to make a right turn, and Slash, when he was a teenager, used to work at the Fairfax Theater, which is right around this corner. Oh, we can't film anyways.
Why?
Because there's an ambulance. But I could make the turn. No, maybe not.
No, maybe not.
Keep walking, guys. I'd hate to be in that ambulance. I'd be already dead.
Yeah, huh?
All right, so right here, right on the corner by Beverly and Fairfax, we have, it's Fairfax Cinema. It used to be called the Fairfax Theater. It's been closed for about maybe 8, 9 years now. Soon to be one of those housing projects. But Slash used to work here when he was about 16 years old for a little while, maybe about a year or so. Now, we're gonna go right down the block here. All right, so we're just a block north of the Fairfax Theater, and now we're approaching Canters Deli. This is the place where Slash's parents used to bring him when he was a kid, and Slash actually worked here too for about, maybe 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
Doing oddball jobs in 1983.
Were you his boss?
I was. I hired him. I gave him a job so he wouldn't have to borrow so much money from me.
And at Canters Deli, if you want to go and pick up a book of Reckless Road, autographed by Mark Cantor, you can go by there and pick it up.
Now, there's a lot going on this block, because 2 blocks down was the Fairfax Theater, then it was Canters. Now here's Fairfax High School, where he attended to and played an early gig with Titus Sloan during lunchtime. That was a fun gig. It's right up here by Melrose.
So Slash went to, and you went to Fairfax High?
Not really. We met in elementary school at 3rd Street Elementary School. Then we went to John Burroughs, and he got kicked out and went to Bancroft Junior High, and I stayed at John Burroughs, so we lost touch for about a year. So right here is Fairfax High School.
Why did he get kicked out?
Oh, probably for attendance or smoking, one or the other, or both. Then he actually got put into Beverly Hills High School, where he got sort of kicked out of that too, and ended up in the continuation program.
Were you guys in the same grade in high school? Or
Yeah.
So you were the better student?
Actually, no. He was pretty good at his work. He didn't attend so much, but when he attended, he did a good job. He was smart. Okay, so here's Centerfold Newsstand.
Okay.
And Slash worked here in 1985 for a while, but then got fired for doing bad business on company time. He was the one that was always calling out and promoting the gigs and booking the gigs. And
There was pay to play then, right?
yeah, it was pay to play, but the tickets were like $6 a ticket.
For Guns N' Roses at like the
$6
whiskey.
a ticket.
Sometimes they had to, don't laugh, sometimes they had to sell 100 tickets.
Well, that's a lot.
It's $6.
It doesn't matter. Still, you got to get 100 people to go see you.
Yeah.
They weren't rock stars. They were just, people. Right here, not this one, but right here, it's now a massage place, I believe, or a health center, like a chiropractor.
Yeah.
This was Fairfax Music School, and Robert Wolin was the guitar teacher. A lot of people went through there. The Red Hot Chili Peppers, Alan Johannes, who is a well-known studio musician, and he was in different bands, the Queen of the Stone Age and whatever, but I took my guitar lessons from there. Slash went there to attempt to take bass lessons, but then ended up taking some guitar lessons instead. And, he only needed the lessons for a little while, probably a couple of months, and once he caught on, he just took off with it. I still have the pig nose amp that everyone learned how to play it in. Because when I started playing, it was about 6 months after Slash started playing, and I needed an amp, so they sold me the amp for $100. That amp was the Kibitz Room house amp for about 10 years, and for some strange reason, nobody stole it. All right, so now we're going to go visit Hell House, since it's in the neighborhood. It's right off of, we're on Santa Monica Boulevard right now.
So this is Hell House. This is
This is a house that Duff used to live with Wes Arkeen, and everybody would stay there and hang out and party there, and you know, they called it, they nicknamed it Hell House.
now when they went to Seattle, that was called the Hell Tour. I saw in your book.
Yeah, that was Hell Tour because their car broke down and they had trouble, you know, they had to hitchhike up there and suffer a little bit, so it was hell.
It was hell.
But it also kind of solidified them, and they knew they were good musicians and the good fit, but that kind of gave them, you know, you lock some people in a car for a week, basically trying to get to the, you know, work pulling together to get to a location, and they become blood brothers a little bit. So that kind of sealed the deal.
Sure. And sometimes when people struggle a little bit more than they should, then it helps their art.
Right. So here we are coming up on Fuller and Santa Monica. So we're going to go north, and if I can remember, the house should be not that far from here. I think it's right here. Let's see, is that it? No, that's not it. Hold on a minute.
I assume you didn't spend a lot of time at Hell House.
Well, I haven't been here in a while, but
Or the time he did spend was a little bit
A blur.
counterproductive.
wow, how weird is that? Did they remove it? Oh my God!
Hell House is now an outhouse.
It's now going to be. It looks like it's now going to be a
multi-residential.
Yeah, one of those big apartment units.
Multi-million-dollar
so
condo.
Where are we? We're on Santa Monica. So let's see. What's a good place to? I'll take you to the first place that they ever jammed together,
Oh, cool.
and then from there we'll work our way back through the gigs.
And for the viewers, you actually have a map in here shows a lot of the places. So if you come to LA, you just use this as your Bible and you can go around and see a lot of these places.
Yeah, a lot of people come to Canters because they know it's like a Guns N' Roses stop on their tour. They're not even aware of this book. And they're asking me questions about where was this, where was that, and I said it's in the book, and they're like, what book? And I'm like, the Reckless Road book. So like they can't even believe it. It's got it all dropped. It's all drawn out for them what their tour's going to be. It's hard to find the map, but it's in the beginning of the book.
It's the beginning. Okay.
It's,
Oh, there it is. So then you get to Canters. First place you go is go to Canters, buy yourself a book, and then you go around and you can go to
first
all the
place you go is you go to Canters and you buy yourself a Reuben.
That's right.
And then you read a book.
Or a Mac
Black and
Attack.
white cookie on the way out.
A black and white cookie, exactly.
All right, so one block from here is a studio where Axl and Slash first jammed for the first time in 1984. But they did, after that, maybe one or two rehearsals, they found a different place to rehearse. But it is the very first time they rehearsed, so there is got to be some kind of, you know,
Magic.
a little. It's a landmark just simply because it's the first place they jammed together.
Yeah, I mean,
Axl wasn't happy with the PA system, so they moved to a better rehearsal space after that. This one was called Fortress at the time, and the other one was called Shamrock. Shamrock was for bands that were a little bit more up and coming. I mean, like Rat and bands that were Motley Crue, they would rehearse. That was a bigger space.
Did they ever use the same space at the same time as LA Guns?
Not at the same time, but LA Guns used to rehearse. LA Guns used to rehearse probably in Silver Lake, where Guns N' Roses first started. They, the one guy, I forgot his name, Nicky maybe, maybe Nicky Beat. He was the one that was in charge of that.
Oh.
I was there like one time. I have no idea where it was. I mean, where that was.
no.
I drove them there, hung out, watched them put together Rocket Queen. But after that, they moved to Gardner Studios. That's right behind Guitar Center.
So you heard Rocket Queen for pretty much the first time anybody had heard it.
Well, yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I didn't hear it with Axl. Axl wasn't at that rehearsal, but I heard the band putting it together.
Yeah.
The music for it. Actually arranging it.
So they more or less self-produced at first.
Oh yeah. If you listen to the songs they played for the very first time, right down to the guitar solo, it sounds the same as the record.
Huh.
It was pretty much all arranged and produced. Very little was done to it when they really did get in the studio. So Mike Link, who produced them, really was a master at capturing the lightning that they had.
Yeah.
So here we are on the corner of Selma and Highland, one block before Hollywood, block north of Sunset. And right here is the studio that it's right in that corner.
Okay.
That room number 14.
All right.
Now they rent it out by the month to different bands. But yeah, it was right there in that corner, and that was the first place Hollywood Rose rehearsed with Slash and Steven. It was Steve Darrell, Axl Rose, Slash, and Steven. Steve Darrell, Axl, and Slash. Izzy had just quit just as Slash joined. So Izzy really wasn't in that band, but they rehearsed here a couple of times, and then they moved to Shamrock Studio, which was down on Santa Monica, very close to Western.
There's no window in that room. It's just a very
No, it's a very small, tiny room.
People just get in there and
Cars are coming.
play their music.
Got
And
two,
Now, how it is, people rent it by the month, so there's
and you're good.
they actually keep their equipment in there. Where before you rehearsed and you had to take your equipment and then they rehearsed it out to the next hour to someone else. Now, the people got tired of doing that and they just simply rent them out by the month.
Huh.
So you want to pass by that Home Depot?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
And that's where the Starlight was at.
Stardust Ballroom.
Stardust.
There's a couple gigs they played there. At the Stardust Ballroom, it was June 28th of 1985, which was their second gig in Los Angeles with that lineup, and that was a really good sounding gig, and I have a good recording of that gig. I remember listening to that "Don't Cry" until the tape wore out. I mean, you could have it was record ready. It was so good. They got at that show, they were the opener for 4 bands, so they were the bottom of the lineup. That was a show I think they had to sell 50 tickets to. They played there again, believe it or not, opening up for Poison, August 30th of 1985. So a couple months later, they went back there. And actually, David Lee Roth was in the audience, and Guns N' Roses played American Band covered that night. That song "American Band" by Grand Funk.
Yeah.
And they got wind that Poison was going to be doing it, so what they did is they learned it like that afternoon, and they played it first. So you should have seen the look on Bret Michaels' face, who was watching their gig, and now they got to go out and do the same song. Obviously, the Guns N' Roses version was much better. There was actually a video made that night by this guy that was managing them called Black. His name was Black Randy.
Okay.
And now I'm on Hollywood. I got to get back on Sunset, but there's a gig coming up here. We'll get by Raji's, so we'll talk about that. But
This is Hollywood, where the streets are paved with gold.
yeah.
Because literally, for those of you watching it, at night the streets sparkle. So that's because they put little flakes.
People think Hollywood is so glamorous, but it's
It has its places.
it used to be cool back in the 60s, but maybe the early 70s, but it kind of died out after the 80s. Okay.
We're right down the street from Heavy Metal Greg's house.
Oh yeah. I'm at Sunset and Vine.
Yeah, so on Hollywood, there was a gig a venue called Raji's, where they debuted You're Crazy, and they played with the lights completely off. So the photos I have were 100% flash photos, so it's like they lit up the whole room. But you couldn't focus, so you just had to guess. You just, you took a picture and then moved the lens a little bit, and you got blurry ones, you got clear ones, you got whatever you got. But
Oh, wow.
it was a crapshoot. I think I got 2 or 3 photos out of a whole roll.
But you were also lighting director that night.
Yeah. To the person.
And people now are going, remember that really great lightning show that they did that one time in Hollywood?
And actually, Paul Stanley showed up at that gig because there was talk of him maybe producing the band, but instead of the band being starstruck, they didn't go that route. They didn't like what was talked about and how that album would be made, and so they didn't work with Paul. Somebody's coming here right now because the paparazzi
Paparazzis are already popping shots.
they're shooting somebody.
Yep.
How annoying.
There's
All right, so I don't
usually
probably
has
right by
stars.
probably about 2 blocks east of Vine, like by Argyle, I guess, and the next
Okay.
street. And it was just a little crappy little place, and it was a time when they were already signed, but they weren't really doing much, and that was just, they weren't supposed to be playing, so they didn't play that gig as Guns N' Roses. They played it as the Fargan Bastages, was a code name, that they would use sometimes that only like the insiders knew what it was.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now we're on Sunset, right before Western, and there's now a Home Depot here. But right where this Home Depot was a Stardust Ballroom, and it was a disco club from the 70s that had bands, and it was in movies. I remember it being in Out of Bounds and a couple other movies of it. Now I come here and shop all the time because I do all the fixing, so I'm always constantly getting stuff from here. All right, so here we go. That was the Stardust Ballroom.
Home Depot, Stardust.
All right, so let's get off of here. Make the U-turn here. I don't think there's really anything that way. All right,
And thank you for driving and pointing all this out, because
on the way back, we passed Club Lingerie, which they played 1 gig there.
okay.
And the day they played that gig was kind of amazing. They made it to the gig because the band had fired Axl, and at the same time, Axl had quit the band. You're fired. Bullshit, I quit.
Who actually was the one that told him you're fired? Slash or?
I don't know.
Is he?
They got an argument. It is what I wasn't exactly there when those words came out, but I knew it was a very stressful day.
Gets to be kind of like when someone breaks up in a relationship, and they're like, "No, I broke up with you. No, you broke up." So you have a fight about who broke up with who.
I think the date was July 24th of 1986. So the band had already been signed. They got signed, 5 months before that, 4 months before that. But it was a little rough ride, and they had to go through a few bumps before they got that
LA traffic.
record recorded. So yeah, now that we're on the Sunset Strip, like I said, we'll pass by Club Lingerie, and then let's see what else we can get on the way back.
They never played Rainbow, did they?
Not that I can remember them playing the Rainbow. The Rainbow was a good place though in '84, '85 for musicians to find other musicians.
To hang out.
Yeah, you're looking for a bass player, you go to the Rainbow, you'll come out, but you'll leave that night with a bass player. It's a good meat market for musicians.
And Lemmy was always hanging out there. He's a bass player.
Yeah.
Yeah, or else they played the whiskey, obviously.
They play the Roxy.
Yeah. played the Roxy 3 times. All right, so we're coming up on Wilcox. So right around here was Club Lingerie. Let's see if I can find. It's no longer here, but the building is still here. So let's see.
Then it's this right here?
I think it's right. I think it was right here.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Nice.
They only played there one time.
I went there a few times. I liked it because you know how the audience went down into like a pit.
It's too dark though for me. I was videotaping that night, and the video came out very grainy. Axel took me to this In-N-Out Burger one time during the recording of Chinese Democracy. Yeah, I like Five Guys better, anyways.
I agree with you there. But the best are Canters, pastrami burgers.
Here's the Seventh Veil right here.
Nice.
This is a good landmark for Guns N' Roses because the girls that worked there basically, you know, at one point supported them. And here's Rock and Roll Ralph's.
And it's called Rock and Roll Ralph's in there.
So yeah, it actually is called Rock and Roll Ralph's, which is pretty funny. We're coming up on what used to be Denny's, where I'm sure they went there to use the bathroom while they were living behind Guitar Center. So it's this place called, what is it called, Aroma?
Aroma.
Yeah, this used to be Rock and Roll Denny's right here. And Guitar Center actually used to be, even though it's right here now, there's probably a picture of Slash up there. It used to be right across. Here's the world famous Doug Weston's Troubadour, where many, 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 many of their songs were debuted. Welcome to the Jungle, Rocket Queen, Paradise City, Out to Get Me. Let's see what else was debuted there. We're gonna go explore that tower video. I'm gonna tell you some good stories. Axel used to work there in 1984 when we first met him. And his goal in those days, since he didn't have a place to stay really, he'd stay in the back of someone's car or hook up with a girl or stay on a friend's couch or whatever. But some nights he'd strike out and have nowhere to stay, so he would literally stay in the stairwell of Tower Video. And then his goal was to get a gym membership card. So he'd have a place to, not to work out, but to take a shower. It looks like I overshot the Tower Video, so we're gonna head, it's another block that way.
So Axl Rose was homeless in LA at one point.
Yeah,
Wow.
and like I said, his goal in those days was to get that gym membership card. I mean, he was working. He didn't look like a bum. He looked fine. He just didn't have a place to crash.
I remember hearing stories about Brad Pitt having to crash and sleep under some people's dining table or on the floor when he got his start. So people came to LA to fulfill their dreams, and
I'm going to go this way and then come around. I hope this lets me through. Across the street from the Viper Room, which was a Central at that time, where they actually played an acoustic gig for 3 songs, but nobody gave a shit because they talked the whole time. Nobody gave a shit. But see, here's that stairwell. This was Tower Video, and so there was a stairwell right behind that. Well, they remodeled it, but anyways, he would literally crash. There was a little shelter there, and he would crash behind there. But what I didn't have the heart to tell him is, I've seen people pee there. They're coming off the strip at night when they're drunk and they have no, nothing's open. They just go tuck in a corner and let it out. All right, so now
like you said, right across
my
the
burrow
street.
was right there, which, like I said, was a Central. Duff used to play there all the time, in the last 10 years or so, doing little gigs there. So now I'll tell you what we'll do. Since this is on the way back, we could cruise by where Slash was living when he met Axl. Here's a little Jim Morrison history.
Okay.
He used to live here for months at a time, and that you can see his windows still there. There's probably graffiti about Jim Morrison, but yeah,
that window right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
He used to hang out at Canters a lot too.
Morrison?
Yeah. The Chamber Brothers so the Chamber Brothers were big in the early '60s. They would bring the Stones to Canters, and so they remembered going to Canters before they were famous. So he saw it and said, "Hey, I haven't been here in a long time. I want to go back in there." All right, so we're coming up on Melrose and La Cienega. We're going to go to West Knoll, which is 1 block. Is this bus going to turn?
Let the bus go.
No, I didn't know if it was going to turn. Sometimes they go wide to turn.
Yeah, it's LA. Just give the bus space.
So, yeah, right here is West Knoll, and this is where Slash's grandmother used to live. And Slash stayed with her until he moved out to live in the Gardner studio. So, 84, 85.
Slash lived with his grandma.
Yeah.
Did Grammy have a big Marshall stack in her house? No.
So it's right here.
Okay.
This place right here, that first garage.
Okay.
Right behind that first garage is Slash's bedroom.
Ah.
And Axl would stay on that couch too sometimes. We used to sneak out of that window. And he had a bunch of cats, and the cats would, one cat was scared, the cat was Willow, and every time you'd open the door, the cat would jump out the window. So we'd play a game, and I'd go on the other side and hide right by the window. When Slash would open the door, this cat would go to jump out, and I'd grab the cat. And the cat was horrified. You
Wasn't ready for that.
You could say I was torturing the cat, but I was actually trying to make friends with the cat.
You could actually pave a reckless road.
But every time I send one out and I go to the post office, and sometimes it's a pain in the neck, especially when it goes overseas, and to fill out all the customs and all that. But I take pride in it. And when they get it, they always usually Facebook me or something, and it's like a little. My brain sends me like a little reward of adrenaline that I was able to get that out there and make somebody happy.
And people still buy books.
People still buy books. This book, they also have an app for it that it's a Reckless Road version where there's like 17 little 2-minute videos, and plus you get to see some of the book. It's like it's like a third of the book. And you can see it on your iPhone or your iPad. But there's nothing like opening the book and flipping through it, because every page it's color pages. Or I should say glossy, some of it, and so every page has information or something to look at that's interesting. So it's not like you're just reading chapters and chapters of information. It's more or less intertwined with photos and as it goes along, and you hear from like 18, 19 people that were there. Tom Zutat, the guy that signed them, Mike Klink, the guy that produced them, some old girlfriends, old band members from Slash's first garage bands, just different people that were involved and their perspective of how things, we asked everybody the same questions and everyone came up with somewhat different answers. So it's neat to hear their perspectives of originally it was just going to be me kind of like shooting some useless information in between each thing. And it ended up just being, like a chat board of every time there was a subject, you hear from each person that had something to say about that subject.
Now,
little paragraphs.
the booth, the booth was used to take the picture for the first album?
No. The booth was they just happened to be sitting here. First of all, they were hungry. They just came back from Hell Tour, and they really had 2 weeks of hell. So yeah, sure, they ate something when they were hanging out with Duff's friends up there, but they just got back. So they came here, they ate, they got the photo. But what it was used for, this photo was for the Stardust Ballroom gig that they had booked, and that was in the end of June. I believe that was June 28th of 1985. So they came back like, June 20th, or it was a few days before that gig. And the flyer, though, when they went outside, they took some photos, and one of them was used on the back of Live Like a Suicide, which is now the sleeve in Lies. And some of them were just publicity shots that they used for different, ads or flyers that they in the club days.
Oh, okay. Okay. And they tore down the Stardust, is that
The
correct?
Stardust Ballroom is now a Home Depot.
I know that they had recently a concert for a lot of the bands who got their start with the Cat House, and they've actually talked about doing the same thing where they'd have a big iconic concert with all the bands from the Stardust, and GNR would be a great fit for that kind of a show. Anyway, just thought.
GNR is a stadium band.
Yeah.
And I knew that when they played the street scene the very first time in September 28th, 1985. And they were there opening for Social Distortion, and the whole gig was running 3 hours late. So the fans were getting restless, and so whatever band before them got off, so the fans thought finally, their band's coming on, and here comes Guns N' Roses, a band they never heard of, and they didn't look like they were going to be any good. And they were shaking and spitting the stage and throwing food at them, and there was like 2,000 plus people in that crowd. And before that, they had only played in front of 100, 150, maybe 200 at the Troubadour, and people they knew, pretty much girlfriends, friends of the girlfriends, just basically most of the audience knew who they were seeing. And now they're playing in front of 2,000 people, where there's about 30 people that know who they are. And they just totally won that crowd. And they handled that stage, instead of getting booed off, they fought back, and they handled that stage like the Rolling Stones would handle a stage, or Zeppelin. And I shot 4 rolls of film that day, and if I would have had 10 rolls, I would have shot 10 rolls, yet they only played 5 songs. Every single photo just came out beautiful. I mean, it was so much energy. The band was just charged, and that's when I realized they're a stadium band, not just a band that could write music and have a good gig. They could handle stadiums. So when the time came and they got signed, and eventually they started playing stadiums, like at least in 1988 they played Giant Stadium to record and Donington to record Paradise City, but they handled that crowd very well too. So couple years later, 3 years later, they did the stadium tour, and that proved out to show who they are. And now all they're, pretty much do is stadiums. So my wife and I went to Brazil in 2001 to see them, and that was 270,000 people. And every one of those people were there to see Guns N' Roses, I can tell you that.
Very nice. And anything else you want to say?
No, it's all good. You covered it all. It's just... I'm glad to help. I'm glad that I was able to live that, live through that, and hang out and document them and watch them make it, and then make it further, and then make it further, and then make it further. It wasn't very fun watching it sort of fall apart, but it's fun again to see them back, and having fun on stage. So it's all good.
Very nice. Mark Cantor of Canters Deli here on Fairfax in Los Angeles. And thank you.
Okay.